Hello and welcome to Sticky from the Inside, the employee engagement podcast that looks at how to build stickier, competition-smashing, consistently successful organisations from the inside out. I'm your host, Andy Goram, and I'm on a mission to help more businesses turn the lights on behind the eyes of their employees, light the fires within them, and create tons more success for everyone. This podcast is for all those who believe that's something worth going after and would like a little help and guidance in achieving that. Each episode, we dive into the topics that can help create what I call stickier businesses. The sort of businesses where people thrive and love to work, and where more customers stay with you and recommend you to others because they love what you do and why you do it. So, if you want to take the tricky out of being sticky, listen on. Right. So what makes a really high-performing team? It's a question that has produced many theories over the years in life, sport, and business, as we all seek to build and be a part of a unit that seems to just smash its goals with consummate ease and get stronger with every challenge it faces. But what does it feel like to be part of such a team? What does it do for you? What does it do to you? Do you even notice any of that, or does it just feel natural? Now, there's always going to be tons of work behind the scenes to get to that point. So what are the secrets to unlocking the potential of not just an individual, but a collective? Well, with me today is someone incredibly well qualified to help us understand the whole high-performing team thing. Look, I've been lucky enough to work with him for the last 2 or 3 years now, and I consider him a good friend too. You'll probably best know him for his international sporting prowess, playing rugby for Leicester Tigers in England, where he's still the all-time leading try scorer for his country, and of course, the British and Irish Lions. It's Rory Underwood. But there's a lot more team credential Rory has that you might not be aware of. Rory has a military background of 18 years experience of flying fast jets with the RAF. That's compared to 12 playing international rugby. And over 10 years ago now, he established his company, Wingman. Did you see what he did there? Where he and the team work with a variety of businesses varying in size and sector, helping them to achieve their high-performance team goals. So who better to talk to on the topic of high-performing teams than Rory? Hey, Rory, welcome to the show.
All right, how are you?
I'm all right, my friend. I'm all right. Good. High-performing teams. Well, there you go. Who'd have thought maybe a couple of years or so ago, I'd be sitting on a podcast talking to someone I call a mate, Rory Underwood. How cool's that?
Well, yeah, I like to think it's very cool, but it's an interesting journey and interesting times.
So what's taking up your focus right now, Rory? What are the sort of things that you're working on and helping businesses with?
Well, there's two things. It's like anything else. I'm trying to help businesses. I'm trying to help businesses get the understanding, as you mentioned in your introduction, about there's a lot of work done on high-performance individuals, but then there's high-performance team, and then obviously you've got teams and organizations, so how do you get a high-performance organization? But of course, like anything else, I am a company. And so in my own role as a business, it's been 12 years and going stronger, even after the interesting small, inverted commas, blip that we just had the last 2 years. But coming out of it, we're in this process of growing the business. I've had a couple of people come and join the business. It's a very exciting time. So in both the same way of what I love about doing my job, there's two words I tend to think about myself. I think of myself as a team builder, which to some people might seem a bit simplistic, but fundamentally, how do I build groups of individuals together to come to be a high-performance team? I'm a team builder. I have no problem with that. Whilst at the same time, I'm a problem solver.
Right.
So there are a lot of, in all your time in the corporate world, as well as the time you're enjoying doing the work you're doing now, Andy, you go into organizations, and whilst you see a lot of similar things they need to do to them, they all have the little nuances and differences and personalities and makeup and geographically split or whatever. So all those different things, you can have your core sort of, I need to do this, but how I do it, I need to think about the best way of applying all the skill, experience and knowledge, etc., into helping that business go through any growing pains they're going through. And it's the same for us. You've been involved with our journey for the last 2-3 years, as you mentioned, and it's been an interesting journey, hasn't it? It's been some ups and downs along the way, as a lot of people will know from the last couple of years.
It's been a tough time for everybody, but not always in a bad way, because some businesses have had an absolute boon over that period. And
well, I learned very early on. I remember still being in the Air Force before I was leaving. I think I just started after the Air Force, and you're not necessarily cocooned, but your mind doesn't think about the sort of bigger, wider sort of social and political and economic sort of thoughts going through your mind when you're in the Air Force. And when you come out and you run your business, things change. And I remember a lot of talk in the early days, during recessions in early times. And what was interesting, the thing you learn is, even if there's a recession going on, there are people that do well and there are people that don't do so well. Yeah. And you could argue, even in a growth period of a boom, there are people who do well and there's people that don't do as well. So, we've seen that directly from circumstances. Anybody involved in safety, pharmaceutical, whatever, they've done sort of quite well. Anybody involved in tourism, hospitality, and et al., then they've struggled massively.
Yeah, tough.
But I'm sure, notwithstanding that as being so directly impacted by the lockdown, there have been loads of other industries that have been impacted, not directly to that, but just because of the circumstances of the current situation. And just throwing in a sort of a line that fits into the whole context of what we're talking about, notwithstanding the real direct consequence, but there's no doubt that if you are a high performance team or organization before you went into this sort of challenging times, there is a greater likelihood you'll get through it because of that. And those that tend to fall by the wayside are those that they don't have quite got that whole understanding of how they work together as a team or an organization.
100%. Well, look, I want to unpack some of this today in the brief time we have
in 20, 30 minutes. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, well, we love a challenge, mate. We love a challenge. I'm going to try and unpack this. We'll go on a little bit of a journey. And so for me, the great thing about your perspective, and I think it is a unique perspective, is that you have experience of high-performing teams across elite sport, the military, and a great deal of time in a whole range of business sectors, right? Yeah. So being the basic linear Quins fan that I am going to break.
Fair play to you guys. Congratulations. Where it's due.
Thank you very much.
Having won it last year, and great respect.
Yes, how did that stick in the throat as a Tigers boy, or did that you managed to do
sharing
that?
The love? Tigers over the time. We've had our highs. We're down the low, and I know Quins. You had your few lows, but celebrate it where it's due. And the way you won your semi-final and the final, fair play.
Amazing times for a fan. Just tremendous thing. But
just on the side there, the first 6 months of that season, the first half season, every single Quinn supporter would have recognised that you were not a high performance team.
100%. 100%.
And yet, it's interesting. Was it just because Paul Gustard? What was it about the chemistry of the coaches and the players that when that one change happened at Christmas time, I think roughly Christmas time, and then how you transformed the rest of that season? Incredible.
I wrote a piece on LinkedIn about something Joe Marler said after the final. And there was a brilliant bit on the telly that sort of honed in on him as we're walking towards a line out. We were trying a bit down. And he's just shouting or saying the word firmly, believe. And in his interview, and I thought that was brilliant, right, after the result. And then in the interview afterwards, he said something, and I'll get it a little bit wrong, but he said something, we just started to believe in who we wanted to be. And so I think, and I think Danny Kerr said something similar on another podcast, is that the belief in them understanding what they wanted to be and how they wanted to play, and everybody buying into that and it being authentic, just released something in them as a collective. I think they were trying to be force fitted into a mold that didn't fit them. They couldn't express themselves.
And you've been on our journey. Where that comes. That is very much around the powers that be. So the coaching staff, they got together, worked out what it was, the senior players, and they created the right environment for them to be able to express themselves.
Yeah,
they created a high performance environment. So, the whole context of what we're going to be talking about is that sense of stifling people's potential. you're not allowing people to be able to express themselves. I don't mean doing whatever hell they like,
No.
but express themselves for the job they need to do and being part of a team. So how do you get the best out of individuals? How do you release that potential? And how do you release the potential of the teams such that they're enabled to, maximize all that effort into producing what you need to do to try and become a high performance environment in the team?
100%, mate. So look, I'm going to start with the obvious bit. I'm going to start with you and your time in elite sport, right? I've got to try not to geek out too much in this area, but what did it feel like, right, being part of an elite team when they were totally on their game? I mean, that England team that you played in the main, steamrolled everybody that was in their path at times. And so, what did it feel like inside that team? Just trying to help us understand that.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, but people will resonate with this because pretty much everybody will have some example of it. It may have been very glimpsed and short-lived or whatever, and some will have had more of it. But for me, I sometimes describe it as effortless. There seems to be no effort into doing all the different things you need to do to try and do it because it just happens. You know, the stuff you talked about with regards to Quinn's, that belief. There was that. We had a belief. Now, to certain people, when you have a very strong belief and you're very confident in your own self as an individual and as a team, of course, how does that come across to other people? It's not very far a step for that to become across as arrogance.
Yeah.
But of course, in your own mindset of the way you are within the team, it just seems as if because everybody's on the same wavelength, everybody's, stealing a military term, same way, same day, there's less effort having to be put in to sort out all the stuff that's causing problems. So therefore it's effortless. That's the sort of sense. It just seems that everybody thinks the same way, believes the same way, is going in the same direction, all committed to that shared purpose. And everybody's driving towards it, as opposed to not sure what the shared purpose is. And so going off in different directions, which then everybody has to put some extra effort in to try and work out what it is, how we do it, and all that sort of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And so what are I'm guessing the coaches and the senior players, what is it that they're doing then to create that vision, instill that belief? What's going on behind the scenes? You think back to that. Take us back to the smell of mud and deep heat in the changing room at Twickenham. What's going on?
There's no mud there. Goodness me, Twickenham. There's no mud. The cracking pitch. Yeah. There may have been Rotherham on a February afternoon or something like that, but
Yeah, that's a great insight in itself. Yeah, the pitch is too clean for mud. Love that.
So I mentioned the word already. There's got to be a very clear goal, purpose, end game, whatever it is, around how you'll want to go together. That makes life the first thing. So for people like, at the time, Jeff Cook, Will Carling as captain, it's making very clear what our aim is for what we're to drive towards. Then secondly, now, in the context of elite sports, and one of the things that sometimes, I get not so much challenge, but people question, it's all fine and well, you saying this is what I did for England, this is what I did for the Lions, but I'm working in this factory, I'm working in that office, I don't have the ability to pick the 15 best players in the country or in Britain and Ireland. And so you don't have that ability, but still, even though you pick the best squad and the best squad of British and Irish players to go off and play in the Lions, there's still a bunch of individuals that are still going to come together and play.
There's loads of examples of teams that have come together of great individuals and never made it as a team.
Well, one of my favourite sayings, and why is it that in general in business, people just assume that if you throw a whole bunch of people together to work on a project or initiative or task, that they will automatically work together as a team?
Yeah.
It takes effort. And so it goes back to the next thing is that it takes effort not only to get the rugby players from different clubs or from the four home unions to come together to play together in the same way, so that we're all trying to work in the same way. So we all understand tactics we're trying to play. We all understand the technical bits we're trying to whether it's a scrum, the line out, or when the backs play, so that all of us understanding how each other works. And I sometimes describe it as there's two ways: having the right cassette in. So
right.
If I used to wake up on a Saturday morning, look out the window, it's raining, I was going, oh God, it's going to be one of those days, and I end up chasing kicks all day. And it was sort of like hoping that the scrum half had the right cassette in. So it was more like a 15-man game as opposed to a 9-man game.
Yeah.
And so the whole ability to understand how you play from that perspective. And then it goes down to the individuals. They need to want it. There is a lot to do with it, your personal motivation and desire. If it's only going to be for self-fulfillment and gratification, that only takes you so far as a team. As you mentioned before, you've got loads of teams coming together, and you've got, a team of 11 Ronaldos would be fantastic to watch, but I'm not sure you'd actually win, everything.
There'd be a hell of a lot of gesticulating on the pitch.
Yeah. Lots of people in the sort of attacking penalty box trying to score a goal. Yeah. But you go back to there's always examples. You've got situations where you get star players in the right place, brilliant. But you also got lots of examples of teams that have won things that have got no star players in the team, but they've been an excellent team. Obviously, more recently, you've seen the likes of Leicester City winning the league. Yeah. Yes, they have got some good players in that team. That's not decrying them as not good individual players, but in the context of how many of them were international players, a handful. But without a doubt, the reason why they won that was because they were an outstanding squad, and that all came together to win the game before they actually played. Is that sort of phrase you hear talked about, and that goes back to what you mentioned before about Quinn's in belief. And I remember back to my time of playing, but more so in the sort of Martin Johnson sort of era, when Tigers went through that run of 9, I can't remember, it's 9, 10, finals in a row. They just had that belief that they turn up and they will win. And it makes life so much easier because the sort of effort and drain that you have on you is not as much as, I don't know, and you've got to think about it, and we get, we might win or we might not, and you've got to keep lifting yourself up all the time. So it goes back to the comment I said before. Sometimes it's just when it all clicks into place, you create the right environment. It just seems like effortless because you're not having to waste your energy on doing stuff that just, saps it all.
Yeah, you just concentrate on getting it done, right? Just concentrate on getting it done.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this sort of unerring belief and a clear vision destination of where you want to go through elite teams, and that's been a big thing behind it. If we move to your military career, I mean, what's the thinking, or how are teams and performance thought of in the military? What is there a difference? Is there a different kind of focus? Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we think about that from the very start. If you take the difference between those in the corporate world and in business, in the military, we're selected on our potential as officers. To take my example. So I'm selected initially on my potential to be an officer, but also I do the tests on whether I can become a pilot or not. So there are all the sort of motor skills and, speed thinking, problem solving type activities got to do, as well as leadership tasks and problem solving that you have to go through. And it's five days of selection at Biggin Hill. 4 or 5 days ago, such a long time ago. And so the Air Force then selects you as a potential officer and a potential pilot. They then take you through officer training. That's the first thing we do is officer training before you graduate. And there's a attrition rate going through that. So once you qualify as an officer, we then go, okay, you're qualified as the minimum, to get in to be an officer. Now I'm going to teach you how to be a pilot. But while you're teaching how to be a pilot, we'll also keep on training you as an officer. So my training as an officer didn't finish once I finished initial officer training. It carried on going for 4 or 5 years when I went through flying training. But even then, we're assessed, obviously, as you'd imagine in the military, on a regular basis throughout every year. We have our 1369, Form 1369. That was the old appraisal form. And as aircrew, we get measured on 2 things. The whole Air Force gets an appraisal on them as a member of the armed forces, but also as aircrew, we get measured on aircrew. So we have an aircrew appraisal as well. Whereas if you take the business, we tend to go through school. We go to specialize at university or college or apprenticeship or whatever. We get into a business from a specializing, and then we're promised that we will develop you as an individual and provide you with management leadership skills, and hopefully you'll grow up through the way. And yet you and I both know that one of the areas that I feel is just severely lacking in our whole business world in the UK, never mind I suggest it wider than that, is there a severe lack of management, leadership, training and skill set within the business world. It really is severely lacking. And so it's quite interesting when you look at the two juxtapositions where, for us in the military, you ask the question, it's drummed into us at a very early stage around leadership, around your teams, around how you build your teams, how you bring them along. And as you go through flying training, you start having to rely and trust in other people, not just running around to do a job, but you've got another, 2, 3, or 4 of us in aircraft flying 6 feet, 8 feet apart at 300-400 miles an hour. It's not the time to be wondering whether they've had a good day. Did they have a bad night last night, or is their mind on it? You have to rely on each other, having that self-discipline to come to the races fully focused.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at my impression of the military thing, there's skills, leadership, bravery, all wrapped up in performance, right? Those things all have to be wrapped up. But the focus on training, I mean, when we've sat down before, I'll get the numbers wrong, you'll put me right, Rory, but I think you talked about almost the 80-20 rule of, in the military, you're spending 80% of your time training and 20% doing, whereas in business it's 8% doing, and if we're lucky, 20% training to do that. I mean, that big difference?
Yeah. I mean, I tend to ask the question, and in fact, it's the numbers that come to me from the people ask. It tends to be 90-10.
Well, there you go.
So, and what's interesting is that when you dive into so businesses tend to do 90% of the time just doing and 10% of the time training. But then I break that down. Of that 10% training, you could take 9% is actually the sort of training you need for that person to do that job. And even that, at times, I come across many situations where sometimes people are put into roles and they're promised training and they don't never get it, or even just don't even just get it in the first, or even promised in the first place. But 9% of it is down to compliance, governance, and just technical skill set you need to do that job. Whereas 1% is actually spent in actually developing people for the future. So the difference between training and development, training for the now, developing for the future.
Yeah. And
the amount of developing your people for the future is woefully lacking in the world of business, massively lacking. And it goes back to one of my personal favorite sayings. It's not paying for it now is a short-term gain for a long-term pain, because you're just kicking the can down the road, and there will be trouble later on when your people aren't good enough to be able to manage at a certain level, not good enough to lead at a certain level, or be able to create that environment you want to have a high performance organization. To me, it should be pay for it now. It's a short-term pain, but it's a long-term gain.
100%, Rory. I mean, I know, even recent examples of being fortunate enough to do some leadership development training with some heads of department that are making the transition from manager to leader. Yeah. But there are guys in the room who've been managers for 20, 30 years. And we're talking to them about some simple mindset stuff, some leadership qualities, and giving them a toolbox to kind of use. And it's sad and heartening at the same time when you've got people who've been doing this for 20, 30 years, sitting there almost gobsmacked, going, why did no one tell me this 20 or 30 years ago? I feel like I've wasted 20 years. I feel like I now understand why I'm not getting anything out of people, because I was acting like a cave manager before, or whatever it was. Why didn't no one tell me this stuff? So I'm 100% in agreement with you, not just because it's one of the things I love doing, but I think people are woefully unprepared for people leadership, and particularly development in what skills it takes. We get promoted on the skill of doing a job before, not necessarily on our capability to manage, motivate, and develop people. And that's I agree with you. It's a massive mistake.
I mean, if you take the archetypal sort of example, which has been around for a while, but it's the old adage, the best salesman doesn't make the best sales manager. And because they spend a lot of money, a lot of these companies that is very much about sales, they'll spend a lot of money on training their salespeople to be better salespeople. But then they don't spend any money on training them how to be a manager.
Yeah.
But of course, whoever comes top tends to be promoted because they're the best manager, best salesperson.
The salesperson.
It is a completely different skill set in going from selling something to managing people to sell something.
Yeah.
And it's the bit that people sometimes forget. Well, no, not sometimes. They always forget.
Well, and that comes to your business. So we're building this picture up of experience in elite sport, the different mindset that the military has on development and leadership compared to business. But
I'll just add to that.
Yeah,
I'll just add to that, Andy, because I always describe the military, all the services, all the armed forces. I describe us like a training organization. We literally train, go to war. But even when we go to war, we're still training.
Yeah.
So yes, the ultimate aim is for us to go and do what military people do, but fundamentally, we train for it, go to war. But even when we go to war, guess what? The enemy do different things and they change tactics, whatever. We've got to keep learning as we go along. So the whole context of us as military people is very much about, CI, continuous improvement, trying to learn all the time. Even from a rugby perspective, the constant nagging I always gave myself was any time you felt as if you knew it all in the rugby context, mate, just retire because you won't improve. One of my wife's favorite sayings is every day's a school day. And it's whether you have the mindset and ability to recognize that and actually grasp it, because most people don't realize it and don't realize there's a lesson to be learned and they don't make the most of it. And that is just such a waste. Total waste.
And I guess that's now what you try and sort out with your business, right? Yeah. Stop the waste and realize the potential. So if we think about your experiences across elite sport and the military, what's that led you? What's the viewpoint you now take into business then, Rory? What is it that you try and focus in on? Yeah,
it's like a reverse engineering, Andy, my journey, because having come out of the military and being an ex-international, there was the naivety of me coming out of and I mentioned earlier on, it's the slightly closeted world of being in the military to suddenly being in the world of business and people going, oh my God, he's a fast jet pilot and he's a rugby international. I'll throw lots of money at him to help my business. But of course, when you first start, people go, great story, Rory, you're my hero, but what the hell do you know about business?
Yeah.
And that was the challenge. And of course, little did I, when you reflect back, actually, when I started the business with two other colleagues, we were learning on the job as it was. There's one day I was in with my flying suit, flying, and then I retired. And the next day, I'm sat there in my shorts and T-shirt in my study back at home, a bit like you are now. He's not wearing a T-shirt, by the way. Listeners, he's wearing a very decent shirt. Sitting there waiting for the phone to ring because we've done some business, various things, thinking, right, there should be an avalanche of people thinking, come face. And it doesn't happen like that. You've got to go out and find the business. And so a massive learning. And so one of the things that came out of it all was this whole context of teamwork and how people, work with each other. There was a acknowledgement. There was a recognition that there were good teams and bad teams, and business leaders and managers were trying to get good teams. But the whole context of how they thought about it was purely based around results.
Yeah.
Everything was, if they hit the numbers or exceed it, they're a good team. If they don't, they're a bad team. And that was the sort of linear thinking about it. But having come from my world of military and sport, yes, that is a measurement. But as we've discussed, as you've been questioning me in the context of the military and the sport, it is so much wider and deeper than that in the context of how you get a whole bunch of people working together to achieve the goal, but then how to make that as easy as possible, how to make it as enjoyable as possible, all that clarity to create that environment to be able to enable us to deliver, the end goal. And so coming out into the civilian world and espousing the whole context of high performance team and team, they sort of got it, but there was more a question of, well, how can you prove, return on investment? And one of the things that became very clear from my knowledge, for me to be successful at rugby, I needed to be very skill set from my perspective as a rugby player, both as an individual, but as part of as a team, as well as how do I work together as a team? How do I fly a jet as an individual, but fly it in amongst three other aircraft? The whole context of how I fly and what I do in my tactics of flying at low level is done right. But I've got to get the context of how we as individuals work together as a team from a team perspective. And so that connection between doing the job and how you work together to do the job, for me, was a crucial bit. It's a sad state of affairs where I go into businesses and I'm not surprised anymore to find that people are not as commercially aware about what their business does and what the people in their business does and what the departments do, even one that works next door to me. Whilst at the same time, the whole context of how do we actually work together as individuals and as teams within our organization. And so the lack of awareness around how they commercially work together and a lack of awareness of how culturally work together as a team is just massively missing in a lot of businesses. And so that's what I intended to do. The whole context of my journey was how do I get those two things, but actually join it together? Because what you find is there's lots of stuff that you can do that sort of measures the ability of how people are being effective from a commercial perspective, and MI and lean thinking and Kaizen, and there are loads of other stuff that you can do. But the whole context of actually, what about the team? But then what about all the teams in an organization? And so there was that two slight sides. And there was elements, well, the two of them fundamentally have got to work in unison together. And so how do you combine that commercial and cultural side of the ways of working is for me the core to what I'm trying to strive to do.
And how much of a blind spot is the balance of those things, do you think, in the businesses that you encounter today?
Blind spot is basically, unless it's tangible, people tend to ignore it because it's too hard. If it's tangible, it's easy to see, it's easy to measure. So if it's intangible, it's too hard to see and it's too hard to measure. So I'll just concentrate on the stuff I measure. So I quite understand why people end up measuring money and tangible bits all the time, because it's easier to measure. But of course, as everybody knows, understands, the biggest challenge everybody has in business is dealing with people. And I mean it in the nicest possible way. We're all individuals. We're all different. We all, come and have a good day one day and a bad day. The whole context of managing and leading people takes a lot of effort. The whole context of how you manage and lead it, it's not a binary. It's not a clear-cut, tangible thing. You can do the best skills and you use all the stuff that you've learned around how you lead and manage on one day, and it may be brilliant. But another day, because of the nuances of how we as individuals and the psychology of it all change slightly, could not be the best day possible either. Yeah. So therein lies the challenges. And so that's the reason why that blind spot is, it's easy to look at the commercial side of things because it's just easy to manage and measure. And it's harder to manage and measure. I'm talking about people.
Yeah.
When they all do their jobs and they all work brilliantly, it's an easy job.
Sure.
Managing, leading people that perform and doing well and have no problems, it's a fantastic job. When things start going wrong, you've got to manage it. That's when you earn your big bucks as managers and leaders. And unfortunately, it goes back to comments I said before. When you have managers and leaders who've never, ever been trained, when things go wrong, they have no idea how to do it. They rest on their, as I say, the largest university in the world is called the Osmosis University. And, people just pick up things as they go along. And of course, it depends on their determination of whether it's good or not, is whether it seems to work or not, as opposed to whether it is effective or not. So therefore, the number of people who pick up bad habits and bad behaviors is wide scale.
I think it's the biggest problem, the whole learning from the guy before.
In some ways, if you get a good boss, then it's not a problem.
That's the secret, isn't it? Right? If we all had good bosses, everything would be brilliant.
100%.
But it's not that easy.
No.
We said at the start of this that it would be futile to try and cover the whole of what's behind a high-performing team in 30, 40 minutes. And, it's been a futile attempt, but it's been interesting to try and scratch the surface of it. But in my podcast, Rory, I try and summarize stuff. I have this thing called sticky notes where I look for 3 pieces of advice that people can take away from listening today and start making a difference back at the ranch. Okay. So on this context of trying to get under the skin and produce a high performance team or an environment that can create a high performing team, can you leave behind 3 sticky notes that would give people some hints and tips on how to do that, my friend?
Well, yeah, I mean, pick 3 out of lots. It's quite a difficult one, really. First one is seek to understand before being understood. I think I sort of picked up from Stephen Covey, I think, but I'm just suspect in some way, shape, or form, it's been in some sort of form for a long, long time.
It all comes back to Covey. Everything does.
Yeah, it does. Everything does tend to do. He's the god of everything. So when you think about it from a management point of view, the number of times I've come across people who they see evidence or they see some facts. Well, they see things happening, and they straight away assume this, and this, and they just pile in and manage and lead in that certain way. So many examples after I've gone through the whole context of running our programs and workshops and various things. The number of people come back and went, I went in there to go and sack that person, but actually I tried to find out why they were acting and behaving in that way. And actually it wasn't their fault. It was this or that or whatever. And actually I've realized I need to do more with them to do this, and this. And so the amount of evidence, anecdotal evidence that keeps coming back all the time is that try and understand the other person, the other teams, the other whatever situation, and understand it first before you try and put your perspective on things. And I think it can apply to anything in life, never mind just things that happen in business. We're so quick to go and give our thought onto something. And of course, if you take the whole context of how do we learn, how do we broaden our horizons, how do we better increase our knowledge and expertise, it is finding out more about other stuff before we impart. Because if all we do is just transmit all the time, you never heard. And it's the same old thing. You've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. Think about that as a ratio.
Exactly. Good one. Great first sticky note, mate. What would you put on your second sticky note?
The second one is it's a sort of two-part. It's the difference between short-term pain, long-term gain, and short-term gain, long-term pain. A lot of decisions that managers and leaders make tend to be, it's quicker and easier to do something now and sort it out now. So just give away or make it easier or whatever, rather than doing a decision that causes pain in the context of resource, money, time, effort, whatever. And so the same old thing, if you keep putting things off that need to be sorted out and just go for the quick gain in the short term, you're kicking the can down the road for problems that are going to come later on. The number of times I hear people saying we're just mega busy, we're fighting fires. The true definition of fighting fires, whether you're in a firefight, and I've never been in one, but I've got friends who have been, either flying wise or on the ground in a war scenario. When you're a proper firefight, you're not in a firefight. Anybody's in business, you're not in a firefight anywhere close. Yes, you can be busy, but a lot of people are busy fools. And the whole context of how you manage that situation, how you overcome it. Sometimes I'll just do it this way. It's just easier to do it. Oh, I'll tell them how to do it because it's just quicker for me to do that. And of course, if you keep telling people how to do things all the time, well, guess what? They'll just wait to be told what to do all the time. And therefore, you're not developing them for the future. So really think about, is it a short-term gain, which potentially has a long-term pain later on? Whereas suck it up and go for a short-term pain now, because it will be a gain for later on.
Great advice, mate. Really good. And what's the third nugget of wisdom that you're going to leave us with?
Well, tied into the whole context of, what I'm aspiring to try and do for business. It's a challenge I give to any leader or manager. So it can either be to the top person, but it's also a challenge I'd give to any single person who is managing or leading any scenario. And it's a very simple question, but it may not be the easiest one to answer. So what are you doing to create the right environment where high performance is inevitable? Because a lot of manager leaders think it's about them, but actually you're the starting point. You're the one that's got to create the environment where they perform. So do you think the people that work for you in your team or in your organization are actually fulfilling the full potential that they have the ability to give? And if they're not, then you've got a question as to whether you provide the environment for them to be able to release that latent potential.
Love it. I love a question on a sticky note, just to make people think. Rory, I'm lucky enough to have spent a lot of time with you over the last sort of 2 to 3 years. We've had 30, 40 minutes to sort of scratch the surface on this. And that's literally all we've done. But it's always great to talk to you. I know you're an incredibly busy guy. So thank you very much for your time today.
Absolute pleasure.
And well, look, I look forward to speaking to you again soon, and maybe we'll do this again in the future and try and get a bit deeper on some of this stuff.
Far away. We love having discussions. We've had some interesting discussions over the time, so more than happy to do this again anytime.
Okay, my friend. Brilliant. Right, everybody, that was Rory Underwood. If you'd like to find out about him and a bit more about Wingman and what they do, then please check out the show notes. So, that concludes today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, found it interesting, and heard something maybe that will help you become a stickier, more successful business from the inside going forward. If you have, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps. I'm Andy Goram, and you've been listening to the Sticky from the Inside podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening.